workshop. So while we let folks in, please go ahead in the chat, drop a hello, drop something you're hoping to learn. I find these things are really boring when it's just me talking at you. So I encourage you to talk to each other, share what's working for you, share questions. We've saved a little time at the end for Q&A, but if we don't get to it, for those of you that are new to Women in Sales, there's an awesome Slack channel behind Women in Sales. Alexine will drop it here in the chat. And there's a lot of great Q&A that happens there. So if you don't get your question answered today, come over to the Women in Sales Slack group and we will get that question answered for you. Anyway, there were about 1,000 people registered. We'll see how many people show up, but I really want to say a sincere thank you to everyone for being here today. And then also to those of you that submitted some of your cold emails. I think anytime we're learning or unlearning, it is far easier to do that when we're actually working with concrete accounts and not just salespeople selling to salespeople. So I've intentionally picked very different industries, very different product types, very different prospects, so we can see a variety of examples as we go through the workshop today. Now, I got a lot planned for you. Number one question I always get, can I see the slides after? Yes, you are welcome to take pictures. You are welcome to do your thing, but just know everyone will receive the slides after. They are meant to be written like a playbook so that you can refer back to them afterwards. So if you do see anyone that jumps in later and is asking that question, do me a favor and just answer it for them and say, yes, 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 you all get these slides. So I'm not going to bore you with who I am. If you are really that curious, there's a really fun little thing called LinkedIn where you can go and you can learn all about me and all about my tenure and career and all that good stuff. For the purposes of today, we are going to be talking about cold emails. Now, we're here today, and I've been dying for an excuse to use this meme because our prospects, as many of us know, are absolutely inundated with cold emails that have nothing to do with them, their businesses, and their problems. I actually think cold emails is so challenging because when you go online, if you spend a 5-minute period on LinkedIn and you scroll through, you'll see about 50 different opinions around what you should do and you should never do and you should always do. I don't really subscribe to that school of thought. I think cold email is challenging because there are so many different viewpoints and opinions on it. So what I'm going to do today is give you insight into some things that I've seen working with a lot of my clients, but then also give you some, hopefully, confidence in the form of data points that help us understand what helps or hurts replies. So we're fighting that battle. Now, there is a big enemy when it comes to cold outbound. And now when I say cold outbound, I'm not just talking about net new logo opportunities. If you are an account manager and you have expansion responsibilities or upsell or cross-sell responsibilities, you are still reaching out in many cases to a new executive in a different part of the business with a new offer. I don't think that's any easier just because we have existing work with one part of the business. So if you are here from the AM or CS side, you are in the right place. Our enemy across new logo, across expansion, across all of it is the same, which is this idea that buyers are really comfortable sticking with what they know. So if anyone follows me, you'll see I talk a lot about buyer status quo because it is the number one reason I used to lose deals as a seller. And the research shows that on average, if you look at your pipeline today, about 40% of the deals that are in your pipeline today will be lost to this. So it's bigger in many cases than any different competitor. But what makes it problematic is there ain't a buyer in the world that ever takes a demo from us and then calls us 24 hours later and says, thank you, Jen, so much for the demo. I've elected to choose status quo. Instead, they tell us things that give us a sign of life. So things like call me back in 6 months. So I would hear that and I'd put literally a little reminder on my calendar and say, I'll call him back in 6 months. Meanwhile, the prospect is thinking like, I thought you'd be gone or I'd be gone, or we could just avoid this whole awkward situation. Because what's behind it is they know better than to tell a salesperson no. They know we're going to objection handle. So it's much easier for them to punt us out into the distance and then, hope we forget. Or things like, we don't have the budget right now. We don't have the budget. I used to look at it as that's not a me problem, that's a pricing problem. What it really was, though, is my inability to help the prospect determine that there was a problem we're solving and we're solving now, because I was way too focused talking about us and way not enough focused talking about how that problem was manifesting in their business. And then a couple others that I would hear a lot are, I'll socialize this, get back to you. Would never hear from them again because they realize the job of being a champion is really difficult and asking for change is a hurdle, or we're okay for now. Now, the reason I put these up on the screen is, one, these are things we hear for in-flight deals, but these are also things we hear in our outbound prospecting as well. And the problem with these is objection handling these is really, really difficult. Like once someone has decided, hey, we don't have the budget or we're okay for now, now I have to enter into this really offense defense posture where I'm like, well, are you okay? Or why 6 months? Why not make it 3 months? And so the whole concept behind today is that in our outbound message, we have the opportunity to preempt the competitor of status quo. And I'm not saying one is easier or one is better, but I will say when we get ahead of status quo, it just reduces the number of times we are trying to objection handle it later. And objection handling is always going to be a part of sales. I hate the phrase of it, but I get it. It's part of sales. But I think any way that I can get out of trying to handle my prospect puts me in a much better place. So this is about how do you recognize status quo as a competitor and get ahead of it in your outbound message. Now, I've broken this down into 3 sections. They're each meant to be kind of build on one another. So section 1, I think we live in this glorious time and day and age now where doing research doesn't require that we sit down and spend 2 hours to research one account that may or may not read our email. So I'm going to show you just some really quick and easy AI prompts that I'm using that are making it easier for me to do the right thing, which is effectively and efficiently research these accounts before I reach out to them. Number 2, I'm going to introduce my problem prompter framework. This is not the framework for writing emails. This is not if you use this, you'll book $10 million in deals. It doesn't work like that, but it is a way to message your prospect that does not talk about your company or your solution at all. And so in doing so, it sets yourself apart from loads of emails that are like pushing product. And then number 3, I'm going to share with you how to write with an executive audience in mind. So I call this skimmers, not scholars. I think the problem with cold email is we all go to school learning how to get an A on a paper. We write with our biggest words, our fanciest sentence structure. And then we come into sales and we never unlearn that stuff. But we're writing for people who are reading their emails in between meetings and they're skimming, not reading like a novel. So those 3 things. And at the end, I'll give you a kind of a call to action. Now, I believe in being upfront about what you do with what you learn. We can all sit on a webinar and learn things and then go back to what we've always done. So this is my ask for you today. Number 1, as I go through this, ideally have a target account in mind. Have an email that you wrote that you didn't get a response for. So you're working on these things as I'm teaching them. It's just going to increase the likelihood you do something with this after the fact. But then what we're going to be working on today is writing one great message for one executive at one account. But I can appreciate that everybody needs to find scale in their job. So here's my ask coming out of this. After you rewrite this one great message for one account and one executive, look at that same account, think about who else is impacted by this problem. It is very rare that you're going to hit a bullet at a bullet and just get one message into an account and book a meeting. But that core messaging is something you can repurpose when you write for one account. Number 2, I want to make this very clear. We're talking about cold email today, but I do not subscribe to this idea that any channel is dead. I think it is crazy to kick a leg of the stool off from underneath you. The reason I teach it through cold email is because it is much harder to make a bad message sound good when it's just words on a page. You can be charming on a cold call, and that's sometimes why it works. So what we're aiming for here is write a great message and then use every channel that makes sense for your buyer and your business to distribute that message. Number 3, once you write one great message for one account and one executive, what you're going to end up with is something that is probably going to be relevant for others at other accounts in your territory. So I'm going to give you an AI prompt to sort of figure out how can I repurpose this message so I'm not going line by line writing one message an hour for accounts. That's totally inefficient and not what we're after here. And then the last 2 things, if you would be so kind, share what you're learning. Anyone who wants to get involved in social, sharing something you believed, what changed it, what you're doing now is a great way to give back to the community. And the only ask is if you do share it publicly, if you don't mind tagging Women in Sales and me, that just helps us understand what you like and what you want more of. And then lastly, when you book a meeting using what you learned today, please genuinely DM me. I love celebrating other people's success. Outbound is hard. And I want to celebrate with you. So that's what I'm asking for after today. Now, let's get into it. Step number 1 is about research. And what we're specifically going to talk about here today is how we think more like a buyer with a business to run and less like a seller with a quota to hit. So one of the things that really stood out to me is I was a frontline seller, not a sales leader, not a sales manager. I was a frontline seller for 18 years. I was 17 years into my sales career, the first time I became a member of a buying group in a B2B setting. 17 years selling, never was on the buyer side. I will tell you, it is arguably one of the best sales trainings is to see what it feels like as a buyer versus as a seller. But one of the things it taught me is that I was really thinking about my unique solution, my unique problem it solves, and hoping that if I messaged enough people about it, people would give a shit about prioritizing the problem. Instead, what it taught me is this. C-level executives are really trying to get to an answer on 4 questions. So those of you who submitted accounts, some of you picked K through 12, university, some of you picked nonprofits, some of you picked public companies, private companies, doesn't matter what the entity is. Every single account has someone who sits at the top of the account. So if it's a public company, it's a CEO. And that person every year says, here is what our business is going to achieve this year. And business can be interchanged with university or college, depending on what you're going after. But every single account that you're pursuing has someone that sits at the top and says, these are our business objectives for the year. Now, the next thing that happens is every functional leader underneath that CEO then starts to build a very long list of what's all the shit that could go wrong in my department that would cause us to not achieve those objectives. So this list is going to be really, really long. Most of us are probably in sales. If you are selling to a sales buyer, it might be something like, we've got 10 open positions. If we can't find quality talent to fill those positions, it's going to be really hard for us to hit our growth goals. If you're in product, it might mean if we don't hit our, roadmap deliverables, it might be really hard for us to book the amount of money that we are forecasting off of this new product. You get the idea. They build a really, really long list of potential risks. Then reality sets in. They start looking at all those risks, and they realize that no one company is ever going to be able to solve for every single one of those risks. In fact, they are knowingly going to let pains and problems exist because relative to other pains and problems, they're just not as risky. And so I put this in the parentheses down below, COI. The reason I talk a lot about cost of inaction is because it mirrors how executives make decisions. They knowingly will let some things burn because other things are more important and we just don't have enough money to cover all of it. So if you've ever had a deal where someone came to you and said, oh, I've got this big problem, and then 6 weeks later, they're like, call me back in 6 months, it's just relative importance wasn't as great as other problems. Now that executive is going to say, I have to knowingly let some of these problems lie. Even though I agree that they present a risk, I've got to let those lie. And then and only then do I start looking at my options to solve these problems that made it to the top, not option. So my first question is, if you look at your email, and if you didn't submit an email, just pick a recent email you wrote for a target account and ask, where are you showing up in this process? What I made the mistake of doing is I was only saying like, hey, here's our option and here's why it's awesome. And do you want to learn more about it? I was doing little to nothing at all to influence how they prioritize the problem that my solution solved. And so when you look at this, those of you that don't follow Nate Nasrallah, please start. He's one of my favorite people in this world. He's brilliant at sales. He did this post, which I love, that I think really characterizes what I just described of what it's like to be an executive. And it's a Reid Hoffman quote. And Reid Hoffman said, being an executive is largely about deciding which fires to let burn. I love that because it's not denying that there are smaller fires. They're not denying they exist, but they are walking away from them in pursuit of fighting the bigger fires. And so if you look at the image on the screen, the idea here is, and I ran into this a lot when I was selling, I was solving for problems that maybe one person very low down in the org chart cared a lot about. Like, oh, this process sucks and it's too time consuming and it's too manual. What I wasn't thinking about is the elevation of that problem. And so when it came time to that person actually getting, buy-in to solve the problem, what I wasn't thinking about is this is often the person that after the executive meeting is like trying to play catch up in the hallway saying, oh, by the way, I've got an idea. Can we look at this? And then they're getting dismissed because it's not the subject matter that the executive team is talking about. So what we really want to go for here is, how do we write outbound messages that relate to things the executive team is really trying to solve for? for two reasons. One, it's going to make our messaging more relevant, but two, it's also going to shorten that window of getting activated champion to activated buying group much, much faster. And so there's this great Dale Carnegie quote, if you haven't heard of it, it's, if you want to be interesting, be interested. If you think about your reader as being totally selfish, not because they're bad people, just because they're busy people, it does change the way we think about doing our research. So my first exercise here is, if we don't understand for the account that we're reaching out to, these are target accounts you have chosen that you've said are important you to try to win a meeting with. If we don't understand what their business is trying to achieve, it is going to be really difficult to be relevant to them. So I sort of describe this in two paths. If you have a public company, take the short path, right? You can find out what these companies are trying to achieve. So if you're newer to sales, you can go to the company website, go to investor relations, and then you'll see a whole list of investor reports. What that basically is, let's say you're selling to a company that has a December 31st fiscal. Right now, they're almost midway through their year. They're going to talk about what did they say the business was going to achieve this year. That's the CEO objectives, and then how they're doing against it. So it's right there for the taking. You can also try going to the company website, see under their news and events, are they making acquisitions? Are they rolling out new products? Are there new executives coming in? Or if you are in an expansion account manager role, you can go back to the sort of kickoff call recordings, discovery call recordings, and understand what they were looking to achieve when they bought. Now, more often than not, we are talking sometimes to companies that are not public. And so here is where, like, I will say, I'm not someone who's like, AI is coming and it's taking over the world. I do view AI as being an incredibly efficient research assistant. Like, it makes it just so much easier for us to do the right thing and remove our excuses of it takes too long to do good research. I don't care what AI you use. I use ChatGPT personally. The thing that does matter is, if you use the free version, you are not going to get good results. You'll often get a response of, go to the company website to find out. So my qualifier here is, anytime I'm referring to ChatGPT, I'm talking about the paid version, which is $20 a month. It's the easiest investment I have, and I don't use a lot of tech. As with anything, when you are using it, don't just put blind faith in it. It always has a source document. You're going to want to check the source document. I don't know how much better that will get. Right now, I'm generally pretty happy with the quality and the timeliness of the sources, but I think it's always just safe to double check. So here are some prompts that I use when I'm looking to understand, what is this company's business trying to achieve? What is the CEO asking of the team? Number one, if you have ever spent 20 minutes staring at an account's website being like, I don't know what the hell this means. I need a dictionary to understand this terminology. I've certainly done that a ton of times. Try this prompt. Explain the problem Acme solves like I'm 10. I had a great sales manager who said, Jen, if you cannot articulate for me the problem that this account solves for their customers, you do not have enough context about their business to be able to have a relevant point of view on how the problem we solve is showing up. And he was right. I would speak in generic terms. I would use big buzzwords because I didn't really look at it through their eyes. So this helps me understand, what are they trying to do for their customers, which helps me realize places where the problem that we solve might be happening. Number two, how does this company make money? I don't care if you're selling to a compliance officer, a technical IT buyer, and every company exists to make money. And so if you follow how a company makes money, you can start to hypothesize how the problem your solution solves might be hurting that company's ability to make money. But first and foremost, we got to understand how it happens. Next, this is my favorite one. If I was on a desert island, I had one prompt to use, it would be this one. What are the CEO's most recent interviews about the company's growth strategy? Now, I'm a big fan. If you use ChatGPT, you'll see there's different models. I like using O3. Couldn't tell you what it effectively means, but it's my favorite way to return the information. It will give you a really nice, neat table that has like the quote, it has the source, and it tells you why it thinks it's relevant. So it shows its reasoning. This has given me more great insight, so I don't have to spend as much time reading through like in reports or 10Ks. I'm not knocking it if you've got the time to do it, but if you're handling 200 accounts, it's just probably not as practical. So I get really good information on that. Or if you are selling into a particular topical space like AI, talent, innovation, you can swap out interviews about the company's AI strategy, and that will give you a more focused viewpoint. Last but not least, if you're selling it to government, a nonprofit, K through 12, you don't need AI for this. You can use plain up Google. Just Google the account name. So, like Duke University plus 2025 strategic plan. They all have to have a strategic plan. It will tell you right there what that is. If you're selling to university or K through 12, usually it's like a 5-year plan. So I always look for those moments where it's like, if we're in 2024 and 2025 is coming, that's great for me to know. So these are some ways that you can quickly get to it. I wanted to pull out one of the examples that was submitted from one of you that is participating. And I intentionally did not pick like a big, sexy public company because we all know those are a little bit easier. I picked a law firm. I've never sold into law, so this is a fun exercise for me. The prospect here is the head of HR, Jen. This is Jen on the right. And the solution this person is trying to sell is an HR platform that companies use so that when they are bringing a new employee on or they're exiting an employee, they don't have to do as much like manual data entry to communicate the information that's necessary in that setting. So hopefully that's enough to be dangerous. Now, I use the prompt I just told you I love in ChatGPT using the O3 model and said, who's the CEO of this company and what are their most recent interviews about the company's growth strategy? It returns Lori. And it tells me that Lori is a new CEO as of the second half of 2023. So we're 2 years into Lori's remit here, which I always think is interesting because when a CEO turns over, change begets change. They typically bring a new strategy, they bring new ideas, sometimes they bring new executives, and that is great. It is much easier to sell into an environment of change than sell into a C-suite that's been the same C-suite for 40 years. It also tells me she's the first woman to lead an Am Law 100 firm, which is just kind of interesting and potentially good fodder for personalization. Now, if you scroll down further, here's how O3 kind of organizes the results. So it tells me the date of the interview or the article. It tells me what is the source. It gives me the headline, and then it pulls out for me what are some of the key growth themes. So again, I've never sold to law firms. I don't sell what this person is offering. But I can imagine that one of the things they're looking for are evidence points that a company has a lot of incoming or outgoing employees, because that would mean much more data, like data entry, manual labor, and that would indicate a larger problem size. So I put a couple red arrows here around stuff that stuck out to me. So it talks about like, one, there's specific practice areas where they are seeing higher demand, so they're hiring more. That's labor, real estate. 2, it talks about these lateral partner hires. And 3, it talks about expansion in a specific region, Dallas and a new Houston energy group. So the reason I like this is because instead of writing an email that says, looks like you're hiring a lot of employees, which could be used for like literally anybody, you can get much more specific to show you've done your research. So we don't have to over narrate it and say, hey, I was researching your account and I was reading your annual report, because they don't care how we get the information. They just care that we know. We could say something like, looks like the team is expanding in Dallas and Houston. And just if you put those two things together, looks like you're expanding in Dallas and Houston is so much more specific than looks like you're hiring a bunch of employees. So it causes your reader to perk up a bit to say, okay, they've got specificity here, which means they must have done a bit of research. And I think that's what we ultimately want the buyer to feel. Down here, it gives specificity around the number of partners. So 22 partners in 13 months. It talks about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So again, I get a lot of different sound bites I can use to show the reader that I've done my research instead of, over narrating the situation to them. And then the last thing it will do is it will give you a summary of quick takeaways. So these are just like key themes that it pulls out from the chart. So what I like about this is it gives me, I think you saw it, it took it 1 minute and 4 seconds to come back with this. That is way faster than if I sat and tried to comb through their website and read a bunch of studies and things like that. So that's why I really like this, is you're not sacrificing quality for efficiency. You're remaining the quality, but you're just being able to do it faster if you've got a larger account load. So what that prompt, or what those set of prompts will give us, are clues as to what fires the CEO is prioritizing. Again, the reason this matters is because if I come into the account at a really low problem elevation, I might get one person excited, but that person probably has to go up the food chart to get people to buy in. it is a really hard path if the entire value prop is built off of solving this very low level problem. So we ideally want to come in with a higher point of view. The other thing it does here, I see this a lot. I've worked with a ton of companies this year helping their sellers with cold emails. And one of the things I struggled with that I see a lot of other sellers do too is we come in lower than we probably should because we're just not confident in our message. So this should increase your confidence level to move up in the org chart. Now, step 2 is about the message itself, particularly stop opening with our solution. So for those of you that are in the US who have been to a shopping mall, which I can appreciate is becoming an outdated reference, I want you to think about if this has ever happened to you. You're at the mall, you go because you're buying a present for your niece or you're getting a new fit. I don't care why you're there. You're just there for a purpose. And as you're walking through the mall, you make dreaded eye contact with one of these lovely people that works at the mall kiosk. And whenever I do my workshops, I ask sellers, what do you do when this happens? And the most common answers are, I just say, no, thank you, before they can even get 3 words out and keep going. I pretend like I'm on a call, even though I think that's like wild. Like the person makes eye contact with you and then you pretend like you get on a call. Wild, but a lot of people do that. I start walking faster. I go into a store. All of them are grounded in the same theme, which was we try to avoid this. And the reason we often try to avoid this interaction is because we know a sales pitch is coming. We know this person is going to try to convince us that we need whatever they're selling. And that's just not why we're there. We're there to buy a present for our nephew. And I don't know if my nephew is going to want Rosetta Stone. So the reason I use this as an example is because in our human day-to-day lives, we run from this. But when we send cold emails, often we're no different than these people. We're showing up uninvited in a space where they're there to do something else. And we're like, hey, can I interest you in this solution? And so it's a really important reflection point to realize, like, at the end of the day, we are all human beings. And if we really deeply understand what drives us crazy in our personal lives, we could probably be a lot better about not doing it in our professional lives. There's no difference. I really believe that. There's no difference. And so for that reason, I want to be so clear. I am not saying this is the only way to write a cold email. It is a way to write a cold email. But the reason I like it so much is because it does not talk about your company or your solution at all. I call this problem prompting versus product pushing. I want you to think about, for whatever executive you sell into, there's probably a good chance that that person goes to events, is part of a community, reads white papers published by authors they respect, read books by authors they respect. And when you think about why they do that, more often than not, the reason that they do that, particularly going to events, is because executives are very curious to understand, what are other people doing that I'm not? Is it working? Is it ineffective? What should I know? And the problem with being an executive, for anyone that's never been an executive, is that your day is full of freaking meetings. And so your ability to lift your head up and say, let me get smart, is limited. And so the reason I think this plays so well is because it feeds into that executive desire to say, I want to stay up to speed with what other people are doing. I'm generally curious about ideas. I just don't have the time or capacity to be as good about finding them as I am. So let me walk you through this, and then I'll give you an example of it in an actual email. So the first statement is exactly what we just did. This is just getting to the damn point. Your reader is selfish. I saw, read, heard, noticed this thing. This is about their objective. Remember, your reader is selfish. They're saying, so what? We don't want to waste time with, I was reading your annual report, or I hope you're well, or any of my name is, before they have a reason to give a shit. So we're starting with what they care about, which is themselves. That then feeds our next line, which is, because of that objective, I'm not sure if this problem is occurring as a result. Now, the unsure tonality here is intentional. Anytime I'm talking about someone else's business, I'm not saying things like, you must be struggling too, or you must be really hard too, because now I'm telling them what their world is. Now, make no mistake, I screwed this up all the time as a seller. I thought you had to be like, I know your world better than you do, and let me tell you what your problems are. It reads as very naive to the buyer. Like, you think because you saw one piece of research, you know the inner workings of my business. Buyers get really defensive about it. So I am intentionally saying, I'm not sure as a result of pursuing this objective if this thing is getting harder. But this other company was up against this. That's where you're going to pull from your existing customer logos. We're not always going to use like Amazon and Google because they're sexy. What we're going for here is relevance. Can I see my potential problem in this other customer? What we're also not doing here is saying, but Acme was up against this too, and they bought us, and then the world got so rosy and beautiful, and rainbows started flying out of their butts because they used our solution. That's not it. That is a message about us. All we're trying to do here is convey we have insight and ideas from other companies that might be worth sharing in a conversation. Then I love a call to learn. There's different ways you can close an email, but the question is very simple. It's designed to get a simple yes or no answer. Are you open to hearing how they did this particular thing? Either way, loved this. This is where and this is my opinion. There's no right or wrong way to write a cold email, but I see this motion a lot where people put personalization at the top and then you take like a really hard left turn and you're like, oh, anyway, like we're the leading provider of this. When you look at how executives read emails, they often read the first line and then they go to the bottom to be like, where's that ask for time or where's that calendar link? If instead what they see is a genuine personalized comment, I think what it tells the buyer is like, this was an email written for you and you alone. So this is not like, either way, I'm really impressed with your success. It's more like if you find something about them that you think you have common ground on, or if you see their business just won a G2 award or something, like either way, congrats on the award. That category seems pretty competitive. That must be cool. What we're trying to do at the end is just not sound like a salesperson who's so desperate to book a meeting, like their life depends on it. People don't like to talk to desperate people. So we're trying to make it sound conversational because it's a movie trailer to what we're going to be doing in the call. Now, oh shoot, are my slides not showing? I hope they are. Alexine just texted me. They are. Okay. Oh, I just had a heart attack. Cool. Okay. So on this was an example of someone who was in one of my workshops. It was like, hey, can I try this on you? And tell me honestly if you would read this email. And I thought they did just a phenomenal job. So I just want to kind of put it together in practice. So the context here is this was an issue of I had written a LinkedIn post. Now you could do the same thing if someone was on an interview, on a podcast, if someone was at an event, if someone was highlighted with a quote in an article. Doesn't have to be a LinkedIn post. But I had done a LinkedIn post and I had this was last year. It was my first year as a solo business. And I said, I had these 17 sales kickoffs and I had lost my voice and I didn't really prepare for what you do. And you're doing all these kickoffs and you don't have a voice. And so they took that and their first line was, saw you're speaking at 17 sales kickoffs this year. Now this sounds minor, but if they had just said, saw you're a keynote speaker, when I saw that preview text, I would have been like, this is just an automated, mail merge. They just probably pulled a list of people with keynote speaker and they just sent it. It was the fact that they were specific, which is why I go back to section 1, that specificity of the objective matters so much. We can't do things like, saw you're looking to drive growth. What company isn't? Be as specific as possible. So this case, what stood out to me was, saw you're speaking at 17 sales kickoffs. This told me this person read my post. They didn't even have to say it. I could deduce it. Now, your voice is in for a ride. Did they need it? No. Is it endearing? Yes. Like, use your best judgment. You should bring some of your sauce into this equation. This is a person who's going to evaluate, is this person going to bore me stiff talking to them? So I don't mind it. You could kill it. Makes no difference. Now, the problem hypothesis, note the use of unsure tonality. Not sure if it's a challenge to keep the calendar booked once a sales kickoff season has cooled down. So you see how it directly ties to that first line? Nailed it. My first year in business, I'm like, what the hell do you do when kickoff season's over? Am I going to do workshops? Am I going to sit around for 9 months? Like, I don't know. And then instead of going for the pitch, which is, well, we helped this keynote speaker fill their calendar with 30 kickoffs a month in April, which would have just felt smarmy and icky to me. They named 2 people that I respect that are farther ahead in their businesses than mine. So Josh Braun and John Barrows. That caught my attention. Those are 2 names I know, 2 people ahead of me in the game. And then the ask was not, can I have 20 minutes to talk about how our solution will fill your calendar? It was actually geared towards, do you want to hear how they overcame seasonality challenges? If you think about it, that's a really difficult thing to say no to. Why would I not just want to hear it? This is an idea exchange. I don't feel like I'm signing up for a sales pitch. I don't feel like I'm signing up to be in someone's cadence. I feel like I'm signing up to have a conversation that's oriented around my business. And then note their use of either way at the end. Either way, keep some lozenges on hand. Congrats on a great year so far. It like this email does not reek of desperation. This email shows me this is someone who has invested time in trying to think like I think about my business. And for that reason, it was just like an easy read. It was an easy yes. And so I like this because it was an actual email written by a seller. Now, I can appreciate, like, I sell to salespeople easy because I am a salesperson. So I know what it's like. I can anticipate and hypothesize challenges. If I sold to compliance officers or CISOs, I wouldn't have a freaking clue what it's like to be them. It would be much harder for me to write that email. So here are two AI prompts that will help you, whether you're selling into a role you've never been in before or you're new to sales completely, sort of start to hypothesize specific potential problems that you can use in your emails. So one of you had picked a prospect at L'Oreal North America. She's basically a head of operations. And L'Oreal is obviously a massive business, global business. The prompt is, what is hard about being title at this account right now? So I just said, what would be hard about being the senior vice president, PPD, this is the business unit she's in, at L'Oreal North America's right now. And what I came back with, the key here is using right now. If you don't say right now, you're not going to get timely stuff. What I came back with is really specific context on how tariffs are impacting operations, how that's impacting the cost that their businesses incur while they're producing materials and goods. It talked about their end customer. So, what's happening to salon traffic? So, this part of the business, they're selling L'Oreal products into salons. So, what's happening to their customer and how is that impacting operations from their business? It talked about pockets of regional strength. So, like, business was great in Europe, it was down in North America. It talked about a merger that I candidly didn't see that happened in April and the implications on bringing a new business into your operations. So, I don't sell to operations, but even just with this prompt alone, what it gives me is a bunch of different problem hypotheses I could use to show this person that I'm not just speaking generically around, are you looking to increase efficiency of your operations? Again, who isn't? But I'm getting down to the root of looks like this happened, not sure if it's making this harder. So that's prompt number one. What's hard about being this title at this account right now? Second prompt is so let's say you sell into finance. I was working with a team last week that sells into a variety of different finance buyers depending on the solution set that they sell. And one of them was accounts payable. So that is a sub function of a larger function. So for that case, you would use what's hard about running accounts payable at this account right now. So one of you had picked LPL was your prospect account, and you were selling a sales enablement platform. And so I simply asked, what's hard about running sales enablement at LPL right now? And the things I got back, again, super specific. So they have basically, they have 28,000 advisors. And they're actually, this is something I'm not as well versed in, you're going to be able to tell by how I describe it, but they're actually giving loans to people to enable them to become advisors. So that signals we are really trying to hire and attract talent. That's relevant to sales enablement. It also talks about this pending acquisition. It's a major $2.7 billion company. This is not a little baby acquisition. And the 2,900 advisors that are going to come with it. It talks about the fact that there were 250 tech advancements in their business, which obviously has implications if sales enablement is being asked to create enablement content on the back end of that. And then it talks about regulatory changes, and then in their industry, because it's a financial services company, the regulations that exist if you don't follow certain regulatory constraints could result in significant fines. So these are just four things it came up with, but each of those is a different angle that would suggest what might be hard. Why might someone value having a platform that can push out updates to a large growing team versus manually doing it and sending emails? So it's a way to frame the need for your solution without talking about your solution. So that's the second prompt. Okay. Now, last but not least, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Step 3 is the audience. I've referenced this earlier, but so many of us Like, we get into sales jobs and we never learn to write for an executive. So some of you may have heard the term mental spam filter. I learned it from Will Allred at Lavender. I love this term. Here's what it is. It's not your email filter like your spam filter. It is a coping mechanism. So this is what your executive sees. They're not looking at your individual email. They're looking at an inbox, and what they're saying is, what in here needs my attention? So this, I'm a nobody. I'm a one-person training company. I am not a C-level executive at the companies you're reaching out to. And this is my inbox. You can tell just by looking at this alone, which is just subject line and preview text, what here needs attention and not. So I'm going to call some out here. You okay, Jen? Jen, you good? Wi-Fi down again? Kidnapped by aliens? I'm worried, Jen. I did open that email, to be fair. And then I said, how many times has this person ever emailed me? It was the first time they ever emailed me. This is why hacks and tricks and like shit like that doesn't work. Another one down here, blank, some clarification, blank, PSU alum. Hi, blank, we are. I see that you're a fellow Penn alum. So are 700,000 other people. It's not a small special club. If you're like, hey, saw that you are, volunteer at Many Paws Global Rescue, so do I. That's a unique bond. But just being like, we went to the same school that 700,000 other people did, not so unique. But there are triggers or signals in here that tell the buyer, this is a cold email. Notice how many of these emails start with I hope you're well. I was hoping. I saw. I hope you're well. Like in isolation, not a big deal. But what we don't see as salespeople is this view. We don't see what everybody else is sending. And that's our competition. So the research says we get about 3 seconds in that inbox view to get an open. If they do open our email, we get 9 seconds of attention, which is down from 10. 9 seconds is 37 words of attention. And then the reason people make these stupid claims that cold email is dead is because of this. 96% of cold emails that are sent are automated. I figured it would be high. I didn't think it would be that high. That is outrageous. That's like first name, last name, fill in the blank, hit send, everybody gets the same message. Of course, that's not effective when so many people can do that now because of technology. What I find interesting is the stat at the bottom. You would think that with the more noise, the more emails that are being sent, personalization would become less effective because it's noisier. It's actually the opposite. Now, there's no way to know for sure, but anecdotally, when I talk to buyers, one of the things they'll tell me is it is so bad because of this 96 stat, that when I see a rep who has actually taken the time to think about my business before showing up and throwing about theirs, I will try to throw them a bone, even if that bone is a no. I, as a salesperson, would take a no all damn day over a no answer because now at least I know where to spend my time. Now, before I get into what Lavender's data has taught me about what to do and not to do when writing to an executive, I want to make something super, super clear. It's something I say all the time. Nothing always works. Nothing never works. Anytime you hear someone saying this is the email or this is the thing and you always have to do this, I would ignore that. That's someone trying to sell us something. You could ignore everything I write, everything I teach you in this last section and still book a meeting. You could do everything I teach you in this last section and not book a meeting. Sales is not that simple that you do this, X happens. That's why we make good money and why so many people quit. So nothing always works. Nothing never works. These are guidelines to help you consider the fact that your reader is an executive. First things first, everybody's favorite subject. Ironically, the subject line. Lavender's data showed that the highest performing subjects had 1 to 2 words. So first things first, count up the number of words in your subject line. Does this mean you can never use 3 words? No, I think I use 3 words probably like half the time. But I know that 1 to 2 words performs best, so I try to shorten it as much as possible. Now, some things their data shows that will hurt you. Using questions. If you look at your own junk folder, you will see, like, I am a target for Viagra. Why? I don't know. But in my personal email, I always get questions about my performance in the bedroom. And I'm like, this is a cold email for Viagra. I don't even need to open the thing. Numbers, particularly when you use it for ROI, it sends the reader a signal that you are trying to sell them something. Punctuation, like exclamation points, is it endearing? Yes. Is it how executives tend to write to each other? Rarely. And then first names is a great example. First names used to be the move because you had to manually write a first name. Now marketing automation has made it effortlessly easy for anyone to send an automated email with a first name. So it actually looks more like an automated email than a targeted one. A few other ones, emojis, I don't know. Use your best judgment if you're selling to a creative maybe, but I would be emojiing a CFO. And then more subtle ones, commands like improve this. You're suggesting you have something to sell them to them that will improve something so they can tell it's a sales email. better, improved, same thing. Like it's sales tonality. And then everybody's favorite ones, like 15 minutes, quick question, thoughts, is a perfect example of nothing never works, nothing always works. Can you send this and still get a reply? Sure. I had a sales leader who, in one of our workshops, he filtered his inbox by subject line, and he showed us how many subject lines from sellers he had that were quick question. It was pages, like he was just scrolling through pages. So just recognize, like, it kind of gets you lost. Now, these are some of the subject lines that were submitted. I put these up here so you can see how easy it is for us to fall into this trap. I certainly did. So, Dave plus Alice not connecting. You could have missed a sale. Yeah, no, Dave, no offense, but I'm sure I miss a lot of sales. And I don't know you. I don't know that you're like, my business is beholden to you, but it's also really long. Peace sign. I don't know that we need it. Exclamation points. First name example. Suggesting that we like putting our company name in the title of thing. I'm not saying it's wrong, but if they don't recognize your company name, is that the highest value thing we could be putting in the top? So the big thing here clearly is length. These are eating up most of your preview text. So I would say kind of shorten them if you can. Now, here are some alternative ways to write subject lines. Not the only ways, but just some alternatives. Internal camo goes against everything most of us learn. Most of us learn that subject lines have to be eye-catchy and stand out. All that does is make us look like marketing emails. That's what marketing does. And so buyers, their spam filter tells them, don't open this. This is a marketing email. So instead, write your email first and then pick the 1 to 2 most boring words you can use to describe the subject matter of your email. And the reason this, I think, is so effective is because if you look at your own executives, how they write emails, they're not putting time and attention into their subject lines. Like if your forecast is overdue, your manager is not sending you an email with the subject line, improve your forecast accuracy with salesforce.com, exclamation point, rocket ship, and no emoji. They're sending you a subject line of update forecast. And so we look more like we belong when we don't try to be flashy with our subject lines. That went against how I always learned, and I think that's why it works. Second is my personal favorite, not because the subject line itself is that sexy, you're just taking the CEO's name and then comments, but because what it's doing is it's activating curiosity and it's forcing me to write a first line that's about them. So let's say I find a CEO article where the CEO is talking about, breaking into EMEA. I can write, John Smith's comments, and then I can say, John spoke about the move to break into EMEA. It's forcing me to write that first line about them. I think that's more so why it works. Rule of 3, use your best judgment. This is the most like kitschy of the bunch. It's where you take 2 things that go together, one that does not. So in this case, if you were selling like, I don't know, a accounts payable tool, it could be, looks like your team is managing your vendor payments out of a spreadsheet. Not sure if that leaves your accountants pulling out their hair come tax time. Is it kind of corny? Yeah, but it also provokes curiosity, which is the goal. The last one's my least favorite, but if you run out of ideas, just start your sentence in your subject line, finish it in the preview text. Remember when we saw my inbox view? That's how the executive reads it. Preview text. Speaking of, something I never ever thought about as a salesperson, really regret that. Your reader is looking for a clue. I always thought about the subject line, never thought about the preview text. When you look at the preview text, it tells your reader what this is going to be about. So if I see them talking at me, so the average employee spends 2.9 hours, I'm like, hold on a second, don't know you. Why are you reaching out? If I see, are you looking to enhance your cybersecurity? I'm like, that's a sales email. Anytime I see, I hope this finds you well. I love you all. I know why we use it. We're trying to warm them up before we ask them for something. It's the siren song. If you can just kill it from your emails, if it's driving you nuts, put it at the bottom. Like either way, hope you're well. But please don't put it at the top. Way too many salespeople do it. I had a workshop I did a couple months ago. Out of 140 sellers, 120 of them used "I hope you're well" in the opening line. So that's just one company. So key here is kill the I. Make it easy for them to understand this is an email about them and you've done your research. You have a valid reason for showing up. Some starters you could try are noticed, looks like, so-and-so spoke about, caught this, seems like so-and-so shared. I will say out of all of them, I think noticed is like probably becoming commoditized. I would kill that one in favor of some of the others, but use your best judgment. All right, now we're going to get into, I've kind of removed names. This is not a naming and shaming thing. I just think it's easier to see it in practice versus just teach a concept. So we're going to get into a few things that have Lavender's data show reduce the likelihood of a reply. So the first thing is length and mobile friendliness. So your reader is 8 times more likely to read your email on their phone than they are a laptop. The problem with that is we write on laptops. And so we often neglect what that might look like. So if you take this email and then smush it into a phone, that's going to be lots of these. This is effort. Our buyers don't like effort. So the data shows you get an increase of 83% if your email is less than 50 words and mobile optimized. Mobile optimized just means like lots of white space. Don't do dense, chunky paragraphs. I gave you 2 of the same copy and one was one large paragraph and one was broken out by sentences. Almost everyone would think this is easier to read, even though it's the same exact copy. But with this, do not lose sleep over getting to like 49 words. I think my average email is probably like 65 words. But when I write with the goal of getting to 50 words, it forces me to cut out anything that is not imperative to the message. And I think that's the kick. Like that's the clue here. Like we really just want to try to remove the fluff, make it easy for our buyer to read. So in this email, it's not a bad email, but it's 178 words. Is someone who doesn't know us going to exert 178 words of reading for us? I don't know. And I think there's great things in here. Like there's the reference to this lateral hiring initiative, but it's all the way down here. Like I'd want to see that up at the top to be like, look, I have a reason for reaching out to you before you even open into the email. So just think long and hard about, particularly in your call to action, where I see a lot of emails get wordy is like, are you free next Tuesday or Thursday? How about 5 or 4 or 6 or whatever might work for you? And I'm also in town. Like just make it easy for a yes or no. Second one, and this is an interesting one, is complexity. So you've probably heard this, reading grade level. You want to target 3rd to 5th grade reading level. The way to do that is by killing commas, killing big words, and killing big sentences. Now you see how that stat is X'd out? It used to be that it would give you a 67% increase on reply rate. Now it is 176% increase. The thinking, this is again, Will Allred's data. The thinking behind this is because AI, so many people are using it to write cold emails. AI writes like a professor. This is a wordy email. We lose the message because we're like, from recent conversations across Acme, from business development to recruiting and field managers, it's clear that internal sellers and managers are growing pressure. Like I'm out of breath reading it. So we intentionally want to try to write in shorter, kind of sometimes like choppier sentences, almost like you text. Because again, the higher up you go in an organization, the more likely this person is skimming. They're not going to read our beautiful prose. So if it feels unusual, I get it. But this is 12th grade reading level. What this is a lot of effort for our buyers to read through it. We want to minimize effort by using short words. You know that like opener, like in these unprecedented times that we used in COVID, that's a context switch. So anytime you have a comma after like a phrase like that, kill it. Just write the second part of the sentence. If you have big words, swap them out for easier words and make your sentences short. Tonality. This is a big one. I referenced unsure tonality before. If you use an informative or assumptive tone, it reduces the likelihood of a reply by 28%. So I said this before, but anytime I'm referring to their business, I'm never trying to call their baby ugly. I'm an outsider looking in, and I'm always trying to write from a point of empathy. What might make it hard? Why might this problem exist? If I was there, what would be really hard about this? So this is all factually correct. Like, hey, your company was downgraded by whatever, like as a not long-term negative outlook. But would you ever walk up to a party at someone and be like, wow, your outfit is just terrible. Would you like my outfit advice? Like, we just wouldn't engage like that. But because emails are a faceless medium, sometimes we do that. This is a great example of we can be right, but still wrong in our delivery. So instead, try to figure out what might make this happen. Why might it be hard for them to prioritize like improving or enhancing their cybersecurity? Come from a place of empathy versus a place of judgment. Not sure if seems like maybe is a great way to start a sentence because it invites the human desire to correct. I'm okay being wrong. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be specific. A couple more, the we problem. Stop we-weeing all over your prospects. The number of I, we, our companies tells you if the email is about you or it's about your buyer. This is an email all about a solution. This could be sent to literally anybody who has the title of CFO. I promise you, a CFO in particular is going to probably ignore a lot of messaging if they don't see relevance to them. So this is, a salesperson doesn't need to send this. This is a marketing email. So make sure you have a specific reason for reaching out, particularly if you're up at that kind of level of elevation. And then last one, personalization. Again, no right or wrong answer here. What I cannot stand is bait and switch personalization. So like, I love rescue dogs. I do a post every Saturday. You would not believe the number of times someone would email me and say, I saw your post on Saturday. I love rescue dogs. Anyway, we're the leading provider of IT and engineering talent. And I'm like, that's disgusting. So instead, drop it down in the bottom. Still, so few people are using a PS. You could use that. You can use either way. But there shouldn't be this hard left pivot from like, I love how you talk about mental health awareness. We help you streamline operations. You see how it's just like, what? Where's that coming from? So don't use personalization as a checkbox. It's ineffective used that way. It has to be relevant to the body of your message. Last few things, some tells. AI loves to say, I'm so impressed with. So do we as salespeople. We're not their grandparents or their mothers. They don't need to know that we're impressed. So you can kill that language up front. It just reads as really insincere, I promise you. Try to stay away from like buzzwords like revolutionize this and game-changing AI. Anytime you're saying, I'd love to, I wanted to, I just wanted to, that is about you, not your buyer. Kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. And then stay away from no shit questions. Like, are you looking to drive growth? Yeah, I am. So this is a reminder of things to do after today. I mentioned, I understand we cannot write one email at a time for our entire territories if we've got a bigger account size. But I believe to my core, if you write one great message for one account and then you zoom out and say, who else has this similar objective? That's where you can get scale. Get scale on the back end when you've already written a great message. If you try to write a great message for 200 companies, you're going to have some watered down nonsense nobody's going to like. So use this prompt. Which of the following companies, copy paste your territory, have publicly stated or signaled an intent to do X in 2025? Use verifiable sources. You can see what they are and summarize the evidence for each. Trust but verify. Go into those sources, make sure that the information is valid, but fill in the blank for what you sell. Last but not least, and I'll take a couple questions. I know we're almost up on time. These are all logos I've worked with this year where I come in and I help companies with their specific market. So it's always tough doing this because everybody sells a little bit of a different thing. But if you lead a team or if you know the team is struggling with this and you want someone to come in, I'm happy to talk to you about how I do this with organizations on their unique solutions and accounts. So with that, Alexine, we have probably time for a couple questions. And also, I do not do individual training or coaching. I'm so sorry, but I could totally direct you towards great coaches if you want to DM me. What about the follow-up email? So this is a great byproduct of reducing length. What I often see sellers do is we put like 8 different points in the initial email. We can help you with this and this and this and this. We got nothing left to say in the follow-up email. If you'd use the one idea rule, I have one problem, one idea, we can often get like 4 or 5 emails out of one email. So if you're someone like me who used to write really long emails, chop them down, do the one idea rule. I like to write a net new subject line, but write it over top of my previous message. That way, if someone comes in at email 4, they're seeing that I have 4 ideas that express me being very interested in their business. They're more likely than someone who just sees a bunch of like copy paste nonsense. Okay, what else? Let's see. Am I going to send the slides out? Yes, always. Okay, I understand complexity and punctuation is a hindrance. I work in higher ed. Is it something I need to get over? I've trained a bunch of teams in higher ed this year. Yes, I know it feels weird. It does not mean you have to be like, yo, sup, like what's lit? Like we don't have to talk like that. But if you are reaching out higher in the organization, again, it's just friendly to the reader to get to the point, be succinct versus try to express. Now, if you're reaching out to the English professor, that's a great case where I might ignore that. But more often than not, I see people that are reaching out to like heads of like deans and professors and things like that. So we want to just be mindful that they're busy. Can we share this recording outside of people? Yeah, sure. Just give me credit, obviously, in Women in Sales. You'll have access to the recording, I think, as long as it exists. How do you think about following up, even if the email is really great and spot on? The likelihood of someone responding might be low. Yes, so this gets set to one of those points. Do not just rely on one email to one person through one channel. This is why, like, you've got to understand your buyer. If your buyer is someone who is sitting in front of their computer all day, yeah, they might be more likely to reply to an email. If your buyer is someone in a field, like doing HVAC repairs, you're probably going to have better luck calling them. So make sure you're using all the channels available to you. Do not buy into this trash that anything is dead. If your target market is early stage companies and AI prompts aren't enough to pull enough information, how do you go about finding intel? Great use. First of all, don't be quick to judge it. I had a guy who was selling to like a one office motorcycle shop, and we found really great stuff about their IT requirements. But if you've tried it, you come up empty, that's a great place for below the line research. So reach out to people underneath the buyer profile and test your hypothesis. Hey, I was looking at your account. I'm not even sure if this would be relevant, but because I couldn't find anything, I was wondering, when was the last time you did this? Some people hang up on you. A lot of people will be open to it. Do not have that conversation over email. Do not. It's always better over the phone. All right, I think we're at time. If your question did not get answered, I'm very sorry. Come over to the Women in Sales chat. Keep the dialogue going. And I want to say a very sincere thank you. I know that everyone is busy. Everybody has stuff to do. The fact that you're here today, that you're seeking out opportunities like this to learn, speaks volumes about you and your likelihood to be successful. If you are new to Women in Sales, know that they put on events like this all the time. They're always free of charge, these virtual events. They also do some in-person programming too. It's not just for women, but they do a wonderful job of highlighting women speakers who are often overlooked in some of the other speaker channels. So share around. Hope to see you at a future one. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope it was helpful. And like I said, if you've learned something new, please do share it in your company, on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you hang out. And wishing you nothing but the best. Let me know if you book a meeting.